BORTLE here, back from the LCS 9 event of the online format. We have here first place winner of this event and fourth place as well, or top four rather, his homie, my goodness. So please, guys, introduce yourselves to the world.
Hi, I'm Luke Coogan. Uh, I'm on Team Eman Games, and I just won the LCS.
And yo, I'm Daniel Heffernan. I'm on Team Mambo from Ireland, and I just top forward the LCS.
Okay, sweet. Well, before we jump into it, which this is going to be the top four and first place deck profile because you guys used identical lists, so that's pretty nice. Would you guys like do some shout outs?
Yeah, so I actually have a bunch, and unfortunately, as typical, I'll definitely forget some people. So definitely shout out to Team Eman Games, best team. I want to shout out my girlfriend for putting up with me testing Yu-Gi-Oh literally all the time. So shout out to her, she's a legend, Keely. And then shout out to the WAF Discord. So it's basically just a collection of pretty much a bunch of really, really incredible players, and we all just talk. We're all pals and we theory all the time. And this deck was all made together with them, and we got a lot of input from a lot of people. So shout out to them, best Yu-Gi-Oh Discord. And I also wanted to shout out Nesh, who is pretty pivotal in coming up with like a lot of the combos that we used during the tournament. Shout out to him for also topping the event. That's all that I can remember off the top of my head. I apologize in advance for people who I've forgotten.
I'd like to shout out Team Mambo, which is actually the real best team. Don't mind this E-Man crap. Uh, I'd also like to drop a huge shout out to like the guys in WAF. This is like my first event testing with the guys in WAF, and they like completely took me in and they like really helped me. Like I mean, I absolutely wouldn't be top four if I hadn't tested with the guys, especially Luke. And I mean, like the list, I can say I absolutely helped worked on it, but it was pretty much the vast majority was WAF. So like Nesh especially as well, I'd like to shout out for just coming up with these absolutely incredible combos. Like so many of the games that I managed to get through just because of the Gossip Shadow Vermilion loops. And then yeah, I don't have like a super long list like Luke, so I guess that'll do.
Oh, wow. Well, with that being said, please take it away with the deck profile, man.
We've theorized virtual world a lot, and I like me and like all the WAF guys pretty much played it for the last LCS, and we thought our list was like pretty solid. So like we kind of coming into this event, we're kind of like, okay, virtual world feels really solved because we spent a lot of time and effort putting into trying to make the optimal main deck last time, and so we went to try when we take into the context of like the new format, it was still quite hard to make improvements. We thought. So as you can see, when you look at the deck list, all the virtual world names, like the deck, like at first glance looks quite standard because I had like about 30 of the cards are more or less mandatory because like if you want the maximum consistency. But we did look for ways to improve as much as we could. Because basically we could kind of collectively agree on that the games where you would lose a virtual world are ones that you weren't able to play. So the deck isn't the most consistent thing in the world, and like it is its downside. Like it's still consistent, but in comparison to what you'd want for like a tier one meta deck, it's the games you lose you just break horribly and you pass on nothing. Really is the thing. So like we are trying to just come up with ways to prevent that happening. And as much as we originally disliked the idea, that's why we ended up going with triple foolish burial goods in the main deck because it's one of the only ways to really get access to more names because like drawing names is how you play. So like we went with 3 of those in the main deck, and so that's like the notable thing. And that the reason we did that as well is thanks to combos that our friend Nesh came up with. So shout out to him again. That we can get into as well when we get to the extra deck. So goods is actually a lot better in our deck than it was in previous decks. And then I think the main other things to talk about are the non-engine slots, which are Talents, Nibiru, and Gamma. So like myself and all the WAF guys pretty much like just wholeheartedly agree that like Gamma is an absolute staple in the main deck. It protects your virtual rolls when you start. It's the most impactful hand trap. It's just perfect. It's exactly what the deck wants. And post side, it can also hit Lancia, which a lot of people have started to main deck. So that's also a huge plus for Gamma. And the reason for Nibiru in the main deck was we expected there to be quite a lot of virtual world at the event, but we went around asking all the players that we know and who like perform pretty well what they think the deck representation will be like for the event, and we all came to the conclusion that so that it's mostly it'll probably be Zoo Eldritch be the most represented, but it won't be by much, and there will probably be a lot of virtual world and combo decks like Drytron still in the format. So we basically said that we can main one hand trap here, So the option where we could main Ashe, where it'd be versatile in every matchup, or we could main Nibiru, and it'd be on average pretty poor against the control matchups like Zodiac Eldritch. But because most people weren't on the same combos that we were, Nibiru was extremely impactful. So while Ashe wouldn't win us the game most of the time if we drew against Eldritch, we felt that Nibiru had a much higher chance of winning us the game in the mirror match. So we decided to main deck it to try and increase our chance of winning more matches overall, if that makes sense. And then the last non-engine slot was tactical talents. So basically, I just think I'm interested to hear what Hef thinks about it now that we've finished the event. I think this card is absolutely absurd. So so at the first LCS, I had to be convinced to play this card because I wanted to play goods and not talents in the main deck. Thank you to Gabriel Nets and Tristan Pugh for convincing me not to do that. This card's just insane. It's not live all the time, sure, but you every time you draw it, the chance of you winning that game just increases so much. It's just the absolute definition of a bomb card. So I absolutely wanted to main deck it, because the more games to my deck, the more likely it is to be live. The more games to go in my favor on average was the theory. But yeah, Hef, what did you think of the list? And what was your thoughts on the stuff we added?
Yeah, so I have a couple of thoughts to add. So just building on what Coogan said, there's obviously so many of these slots in the main deck are just completely mandatory. For example, you need to play the maximum amount of virtual rule monsters as well as virtual rule spells and traps. Just to build on his point about the flex slots, 3 Nibiru, 3 Gamma. Well, I guess Gamma's probably not flex, and 3 talents. There was a pretty deep discussion about the applicability of your cards and how many situations your cards will be strong in general. And this is something that honestly I was mistaken about before we went into the event. I thought that potentially playing a more applicable card like Ashe over a card like Talents in the main deck would mean that in more situations you'd be able to stop your opponent and be able to play afterwards. But after seeing the impact of triple tactical talents for the entire day, I'm fairly certain I wouldn't have even come close to 4th place without main decking 3 copies. There's a couple of hands you can open, and a lot of them involve talents where you just win on the spot, no matter what your opponent has. If you were to go first and you manage to side in I don't want to talk too much about side, but if you sided in a copy of not Foolish Burial Goods, sorry, Call by the Grave, and then you opened a play, Call by the Grave, and talents, and your opponent activates a hand trap, you pretty much won that game on the spot. It happened to me a couple of times as well. And then the other cards I guess Nibiru, it's pretty obvious that card especially isn't super strong in control matchups, but I think luckily it's just good enough in matches like Zoo Eldritch. So for example, whenever they make Zeus, Nibiru is live, almost always. And the fact that if you can just play your turn without having to deal with a 2 or 4 material Zeus, it makes it so much easier. It means you're Shen is sticking, and you're also dealing with a lot of their back row significantly more effectively when you have Shen on board. As well, there was a pretty big discussion over cutting a copy of Foolish Burial Goods to play 40 cards in the main deck. But due to certain siding cards, we felt that it was more impactful to play a 3rd copy of Goods, and further, what we thought was a matchup that we needed to win more in, which was the Zoo Eldritch matchup, than to just play 40 cards and expect to see your stronger cards more often. So I think that's pretty much all I have to say about the main deck.
Okay, great. That's a great explanation. Would you guys like to run down this extra deck?
I guess I'll start with the new card. So Chao Feng, Phantom of the Yangzing, is basically the integral part of this deck. So basically, Nesh came up with a bunch of these combos, and they're really low cost combos. It's just I'm not gonna name the card combinations because you guys can go figure them out yourself. But or maybe that's a video actually. But basically, yeah, more content. But basically, what would be normal virtual world openings where you end on, let's say, just VFD, or you lose to Nibiru, or you lose to a hand trap, or any hand trap, or whatever interaction, Chao Feng absolutely just makes your combos incredibly cost efficient. So basically, you'll set up 70 on average in your normal hands. You'll set up your 75 as the 5th summon, and then you'll make Chao Feng, pop it with your own Chuche, add Lolo. Then Lolo will, you can do, this is just one of the versions, but you can make Cloud Castle, revive the Chao Feng, make VFD. And that's just in your awful hands. That's literally a hand that would not make VFD without Chao Feng does it with 75. So like it makes the deck substantially better, and you play through interactions. So if you do not own any copies of Chaofeng, Phantom of the Yangtze, feel free to purchase now. um, then Cloud Castle, we've ended up playing one. So some of the people that we were talking with really wanted to play two. Personally, I've like it comes up on very rare occasions that I'm like, a second Cloud Castle would be kind of nice here. But I've never like lost a game to not having a Cloud Castle, and I think that's like an important distinction when choosing extra deck slots. Because you obviously have a very finite amount of like space in the extra deck. So like even if a card comes up, it doesn't mean you should play it. Like it really it depends on how many like losses that it converts to wins really. Because like another card that does that is Fan. It comes up, and when it's good, it's really nice, but you can pretty much always win the games without it. So like there's no reason to play it, unfortunately, even though I love the card. So what's your opinion on that, Hef, on like Cloud Castle? Are you glad that we played one, or did it ever come the second one ever come up for you?
Just like so the idea between playing or of playing one Cloud Castle is that we could fit in a copy of Utopia Beyond. And without Utopia Beyond, the main deck has no out to a Dragoon, which means that if your opponent resolves Red Dead Fusion, you have to scoop on the spot because you don't have an out. Yeah, sorry, talents. Yeah, but it can be kind of hard to resolve, but having like an extra deck out to a kind of a common monster gives me peace of mind. I think like maybe I didn't use it too much today, but the fact that it was there meant that I wasn't shitting it every time I ran into like some sort of Dragoon deck. And to be honest, I think there was one opportunity today where I could have made a second Cloud Castle, but the game was already lost, so I wouldn't count that as a serious drawback. One more point I'd like to add about Utopia Beyond in that it doesn't come up too often, but if you can get Utopia Beyond and start as Charge Warrior uninterrupted on the field, while your opponent has multiple monsters in attack position, it becomes very easy to kill them because Stardust Charge Warrior attacks over all these monsters that have 0 attack.
Yeah, that's insane. Actually, I forgot to mention that. Then next is Hef's favorite card, Coral Dragon. He makes this. Hef, I swear, uses Coral Dragon so much. It's just a good generic synchro. You can make it turn 1 for a free draw while you're laddering into like Shen or things. It's pretty staple. Playing the back row, it's insane, especially in control matchups, because you're like, okay, I'm summoning this to bait a back row, and if you conk it or use punishment or anything on it, then I'm going to draw a card for my troubles. And so it's really annoying. So definitely very good card.
Coral Dragon is the weapon of the deck.
It is, yeah. It's like it's how you remove everything. It's like it's so clean too because it refunds you for the card you discard. So it's like it's really clean, especially when your discards are good, long and stuff.
Yeah, because it can just further the combos, which is very strong.
Yeah, for sure. And then Croco is obviously standard just because it's a good level 9. Something that isn't done very often is Croco, if you get hand trapped and you can't make VFD, is actually an incredible interaction, specifically in the mirror match. So like if you can end on like Croco and trap, even if you got absolutely obliterated by hand traps, that's pretty hard to stop if you just pop their targets. So that's but card is very good as well. Then Charge Warrior, it's pretty much just whenever it's like an alternative Coral turn 1, like which if you'd rather have a non-tuner to draw, then you go for Charge Warrior. Pretty good in this deck, and then it facilitates OTKs like Hef mentioned. I didn't get to do any of those, unfortunately. Did you have?
I pulled off one today, which was very impressive. I think.
No way, that's insane. Yeah, I'm jealous of that.
Yeah, it was crazy. It was good though.
That's cool. And Vermilion, this card's actually quite important to discuss as well because the WAF guys came up with like a bunch of Vermilion combos as well. So like that's actually how the Chaofeng loops originated, where there was a bunch of combo variations to play through Nibiru that use Vermilion. Basically how you do that is you make like 75 if possible, most hands will do it, or in absolutely unplayable hands, then you can still Vermilion loop, where you make Vermilion with let's say this is obviously pretty idealistic because you've drawn E-Telly, but let's say you have like E-Telly and let's say a way to summon a level 6 or modulate the level to get level 6, for example. So you can make Vermilion, banish to like a Lulu or a Lau, pop itself, and then add it back, and then Cloud Castle someone back the Vermilion and make VFD. So it basically, it's a similar thing to Chaofeng where it makes your VFD really low cost, which is like huge because it actually makes the world of a difference when you're getting interacted with. Because like you go from like having 1 or 2 virtual world names to being able to access a third.
I think in situations where you can make the Vermilion, it's pretty much always superior to the Chaofeng loop because the Chaofeng loop forces you to use your trap pop on the Chaofeng to use the effect. Whereas the Vermilion just like pops itself, which means that you're ending on VFD Tuche instead of just VFD, which is significantly more impactful than just VFD.
Absolutely. Chao Fang is just basically there for when your hands don't allow you to do that, which does come up. But yeah, Vermilion also has amazing utility going second, because it does the same thing as Coral Dragon, where you summon it into a board and say, you have to interact with this, but you really don't want to interact with this. So yeah, and it's also being like having that type of pressure on the board and being a 9 is insane. Juju, Zuel Lich's absolute worst nightmare. So there was actually a while where I think we underrated this card. But playing into like back row like Conquistador and Punishment with this is insane, because like it can't be destroyed by battle or card effects while you have two or more, while you have two monsters in your graveyard with same original type but different names. And it also sends a card to the graveyard too. So like it's like when you can make it over Coral Dragon, it's usually better than it, but it's also completely immune to interaction, which is very relevant in some matchups. And some decks really struggle to clear this card, so that's also a nice boost. Did you make it much in the tournament? Actually, have
I made this card quite a lot. I think potentially what the biggest strength of the card is that it's very typical when you're playing against Virtual World, when your opponent activates a Virtual World monster targeting one of their cards, like for example a trap. It's very, very common that the like card it's targeting gets popped or banished or something. Whereas like when you summon the like level 6 Synchro Juju, and you have two monsters in the grave, you can pretty much safely activate all your Virtual Worlds targeting Juju because it can't be destroyed, which can like force Virtual Worlds through in some situations where otherwise they wouldn't be able to. Which I think just increases the power level of the deck.
absolutely, and that's a huge thing, because the difference between like resolving a Virtual World and like is actually nuts. Because I feel like every time one Virtual World goes through, I'm just able to play the game, and I feel a lot more confident in the situation. Shen Chen, MVP of the deck for sure. Like just like
The god card.
absolute beast. Like, he absolutely makes a mess of all Eldritch variants. It's actually disgusting. Not much to say about it. Recursive 9, extremely good card. A bit of a funny story. My only loss the entire weekend was to a dinosaur player who read Shen Chen for the first time and was just absolutely astounded by it. And he was just like, okay. And he just didn't know how to play. He just didn't know how to play around it. This like Shen Chen in some matchups, it's absolutely just incredible. Especially against like Eldritch variants though, because it has a lot, like Shen Chen has a lot of like hidden effects in what like its effect stops. So like Lord effect to summon from grave doesn't work under Shen Chen. So they can't summon Lord from the grave, and Lord with it like that's not summoned from the grave, it's only 25. So they actually can't clear Shen Chen once it hits the board without a different engine or a way to get to Conquistador. So it is extremely difficult for control decks to beat Shen Chen Trap. So it's an alternative end board in some instances too, especially through disruption.
Yeah, I think maybe one of the strongest parts about this entire deck is that even when you don't get to the end board of VFD, which is the main play, you sort of stop on Shen Shen like on the way there, and it's like a very similar power level to VFD, obviously like a little bit lower. Like when it's on the field, it pretty much demands a response or your opponent loses.
Then on to the next card, M7. I summoned M7 so many times this weekend. Absolutely, so he was my favorite card, man. So it's a fantastic utility card. Adding back your own resources in the grand game is fantastic. But what I was doing all weekend was we're siding Artifact Lancia, which I'm sure we'll touch on later. But in the mirror match, I'd activate Lancia. Most of the time, they would do whatever they could. They would do whatever they can muster up, and then they'd pass. And then me playing into the board, I would try to play into hand drops as best as I could. And a really, really effective way to do that is to summon my virtual world monsters and then make M7 before my 5th summon, and just M7 add back my Lancia, and just absolutely Lancia them again next turn. Like,
I mean, it is just super strong to even have one turn of Lancia because it pretty much means your opponent can't set up trap for the following turn.
yeah,
And while VFD can be oppressive, there are certain hands that can make your own VFD through their VFD. It sort of becomes impossible if your opponent has a live Chuche, whereas the Lancia absolutely guarantees they won't have the live Chuche.
yeah, Zeus. I didn't make this card that much, but when I made it, it was like incredible. It's definitely like a staple in the deck, and it means that you can use utility cards like Break Sword and M7, and then them also be like proactive and like a defense for you. So it's just invaluable. There was a game I played against my friend June playing Dinosaur.
Like one of the biggest strengths about VFD, or not VFD, but Zeus, is that it combos really well with triple tactical talents, especially into the LZU deck. So if you can if you can like bait Dryden somehow, and then resolve talents to like take control of the Trident, attack, slap your own Zeus down. If they don't have a response, the game is over. You win. It's very strong.
Absolutely, yeah. It just is an incredible card. I definitely like. It's definitely just a staple in the deck. Then Utopia Beyond. We've talked about this a little bit already. The main purpose of it is a Dragoona, but also like you're able to Zeus on top of it for materials, which is pretty good.
Yeah, and then I guess the next card is like Bamboozling Gossip Shadow, and like before we start talking about this card, I'd like to point out that the opportunity cost, not the opportunity cost of Shadow, but the alternative to Shadow is the Zulkin Crystal Wing combo, and I think it's pretty obvious to everyone that Crystal Wing is just a flat out stronger card than Gossip Shadow, but the main strength of Gossip Shadow lies in the fact that it's very easy to make, whereas Crystal Wing is very resource intensive, and I know like Luke was speaking about the like Chow Feng combos and the Vermilion combos, and like the Gossip Shadow just fits into that so well. When you open a sort of a hand that can put I guess like a Lily, a Lulu, and like maybe any two other level 3s on the field, you can just make Gossip Shadow, and that pretty much guarantees that your like Vermilion or like Chow Feng loop will resolve, which means that you will end on VFD, which is usually a game. I'm pretty sure I didn't make Gossip Shadow today and lose a game. So whenever I summoned it, I won, which is I think pretty telling that the card is absolutely amazing.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. It's also like it has a really like cute interaction where so Gossip Shadow doesn't actually negate the activation of the hand trap it negates. So if your opponent reveals Nibiru and then you just like you Gossip Shadow, you both draw one. And that it is obviously a downside letting your opponent draw a card, but when you VFD them, you don't care how many cards they have in their hand, they're gonna lose to the VFD, right? But you can like talents, so you can, because the effect has just changed to draw one, it wasn't negated. So you can talents rip a card out of their hand, or draw two, or take control of something, and that might not seem super relevant in like when you're gone first. But if you've already been interacted with, or you're going second and you get to use Shadow, that can definitely just be a huge benefit. So for sure, that does come up sometimes too.
It came up at least twice for me, I think, today.
Breaksword. Some people are cutting this card, but I think it's a staple. Like it's just utility. It just forces things into back row.
I think also one interaction that's probably worth pointing out for like Breaksword is that in certain like low resource situations, when you attempt to activate Lulu in hand, but the like target gets popped and you have like a Nyan engrave, if you like normal summon the Lulu, you sort of need like something to make with those two monsters because they're obviously both tuners. So like the fact that you have a card that puts on offensive pressure with just a Lulu and a Nyan, I think is really strong. And the fact that it can pop a card and then go into Zeus is, I'm pretty sure it like guarantees a slot in the deck, but I'm not really sure why you ever cut this card.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. And then of course, very fun dragon. I think that obviously you play two because there's some combos where like you play through Nibiru by making a second one. We actually didn't do that very often, but we still play two because it comes up to make the second one if like, because the first one isn't always game. Sometimes it gets droplets. Sometimes something happens to it. It's never, VFD is never safe, even though it should be. Every time you can't end with the trap, they droplets you. Like so so like so yeah, it's always good to have a second one.
Yeah, I think like one of the main strengths of playing a second copy of VFD is that it sort of allows you to extend beyond Nibiru in certain hands. For example, if you were to open a hand where you could make two level 9s and then you get Nibiru on VFD, and if you haven't used the Lao Lao, you can just make bring back a GG or a Nyan and make Castle to go into your like second copy of VFD, and then I think at that point the game is over.
It's crazy that Chow Fang. It's guess what? It's already been bought out. So the site, as far as the site goes, yeah, a lot of hand traps here. That's pretty nice. Man, this Pankatrops with the field spell. That's pretty cool. Why'd you guys do that?
This was like one of the sticking points of the discussion when we were talking about this deck, and it's the reason we're playing 41 cards versus 40 cards versus a control matchup. I think you sort of live and die by your side cards in game 2 and 3. Pretty clear. For example, we're playing 3 copies of like evenly matched and like 1 copy of like Harpy's Feather Duster and like 1 copy of like Pankratops, which is like 5 total side cards. But if you include a copy of World Dino Wrestling, all of a sudden, Foolish Burial Goods becomes a way to access Pankratops, which means you now have 3 additional cards with which to beat your opponent. You're going to see a copy of Pankratops where you otherwise wouldn't have. And like Pankratops is probably one of the strongest cards, maybe bar evenly matched in the matchup. especially if they have a board like Zeus Trident, because the Pankratops is usually always trading 2-for-1 into that really, really strong control board. And then if you follow it up with an actual virtual world play, it puts you in like a very commanding position. So I mean, that's pretty much all I have to say about that, Luke, if you want to chime in.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was that was the deciding factor for sure on 41. It really did break my heart to play 41. I'm definitely someone who always wants to play 40 cards. But it was like we had a few options, so we could play the three goods, but we'd have to cut down on on a Nibiru or a Talons. Five hand traps is mathematically correct if you want to see one, but we decided that Nibiru was like so impactful that we wanted to see more Nibirus. And to do that, unfortunately, we did have to play 41. But the increased consistency actually does just make up for the 41st card. I think this once it was probably fine. And with the added benefit of the wrestling inside, is just absolutely just sold it. I think because it makes your control matchups so much better. And Pankratops are just incredible against the control matchups.
Well, again, guys, thank you so much for this very informative deck profile. This was really nice, and I want to say that it's pretty exciting to see you guys, get first place and top 4 for this event. It's really cool.
That was awesome. Absolutely, man. Thanks for having us.
Yeah. So, yes, again, thank you so much for being a part of the channel. And listeners, if you're not a part of BORTLE Nation, sub for BORTLE. It's that easy and it's free. Oh, God, yes. BORTLE out.